Hey everybody, welcome back to Tenta Outdoors. My name's Alan. I was fortunate enough to be the last person standing on season 10 of Alone. Today's video, I've collected all the questions from Reddit, all the questions from Instagram, and I'm doing a massive Q&A session right now. Stick around. A super special shout out to Wyatt. So when the helicopter came, picked up my wife and I on day 66, and we flew back to camp for the refeeding process. Obviously Wyatt was already there. My feet had barely hit the ground getting out of that helicopter, and a big hairy man wrapped his arms around me so tightly, gave me the biggest hug and said, "Congratulations, man, I'm so happy for you." And it was so real and so genuine. Just an absolute class act from Wyatt. Wyatt and I are planning a fishing trip next spring. The logistics aren't worked out, but it's gonna happen, and I'm already excited about it. So these questions are in no particular order. I just kind of typed them out in the order that they came on Reddit and Instagram. First question, what was worse, starving or the cold? Definitely the cold. I found my body got used to having much less food fairly quickly, and it actually wasn't that bad. Question number 2, how much food did I have left? Did I run out and have to fast? I had 2 large pieces of fish left on day 66 when they picked me up. I had half of a lake trout that I caught on day 49, and I had half of a smoked whitefish that I caught on my birthday. I think that must have been day 43. The whitefish was smoked, but the lake trout was just frozen because I caught it on day 49 and I didn't have to preserve it. Did I have to fast? No, I did not. So I had food till about day 68, 69. Actually, I could have stretched the whitefish out a little bit more because it was a bigger chunk. The hardest part to readjusting to normal life, probably the noise. I think the noise, being in a restaurant and all the different voices around you, I found that I felt kind of anxious for the first couple of weeks back because you could almost hear every individual conversation around you, and it just took some readjustment time, but it wasn't too bad. Next question is items. Would I swap or change any of my items? That question also popped up quite a bit. I was very happy with the 10 items that I chose, and if I did it again, I would take the exact same items. Yeah, they all played their part. Like, even though there wasn't a lot of snaring that went on, I used that snare wire for building, and I used that snare wire to build all my lures. I needed the axe for splitting my wood. Axe was the one I was not sure about, but if I had to stay longer, then the axe would have been instrumental in having to chop through the ice. How did I keep my positive attitude throughout even the dark days? I think preparation beforehand, knowing it was coming, watching some meditation videos, and just convincing myself, telling myself that this was going to be over soon, and this was short term. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I want to embrace it and do the best that I can. That was kind of rambling, but that's the best I can do on that one. Did I know I had wanted the med check? Absolutely not. The night before, I had sent a message because I had run out of batteries for my mic. So I heard the helicopter come, and I thought they were just bringing me more batteries. And it ended up being a med check as well. It was on my yellow brick, but I hadn't seen it yet because I was asleep. But no, I honestly had no idea. The next question is around refeeding me after they arrived on day 66. Did it start right away, or did I have to wait some time? So right after my wife snuck up behind me and the celebration and the hugs and all that stuff, I was instantly given a thermos of hot bone broth. Was that ever sweet? It was unbelievably good. I was also given a handful of multivitamin pills, and I was given a few almonds and some dried apricots. So it began immediately. Will I hang out with Wyatt or others? Absolutely. As I said in the intro to the video, Wyatt and I have already talked about a fishing trip in the spring, and Kate and I have talked. I want him to come over and I'll take him to a hockey game in Calgary. And I'd love to go see some other people from the show as well. Did I see big game? I did not see any big game. I saw tracks, I saw bear scat, but it was fairly old because there's no berries in my sight. The bears had been there previously, but I didn't hear or see any bears or fresh bear sign. And I think it was episode 6 or 7, I did find some moose tracks further up in the bush when I walked out to the point to do that fishing, but nope, no big game, unfortunately. I was really hoping to, and I did quite a bit of moose hunting, but it didn't make the edit. I had some good spots where I'd hike to the end of my bay, and I found like a natural tree stand over a little clearing, and I did a lot of calling, but no responses and no luck. So the refeeding process. So after you're picked up from your site, you go back to camp. They do not just release you into the world, because after your body's been in starvation mode, it's dangerous just to eat whatever you want, and you'd end up in the hospital really quickly. There's a nutritionist and doctors that have a meal plan set out for you, and they slowly start feeding you. My first meal in refeeding was like a few tablespoons of rice and a tiny slice of beef with some gravy on it. It was delicious. And the next morning had a tiny little bowl of porridge. And it just, every day you got a little bit more and a little bit more. I think it was there for maybe 8 or 9 days. I can't really remember, but it definitely was a slow process. What was my first meal after the refeeding? So Wyatt and I flew out to Saskatoon together, and we had to stay overnight in a hotel before our flights back home over the next several days. And Wyatt and I went out to a restaurant, and I had a Hawaiian pizza with a pint of ice cold IPA. Delicious. I was a bit surprised, but there was a lot of questions about bathroom and pooping and wiping your butt. So I guess I'll get into it. Did I have a bathroom per se? No, I did have an area where I kind of went. And when you're not eating much, you don't go that much, you know, every 3 or 4 days. And did I wipe my butt? Yes, I did. Luckily, in our area, there was lots of damp moss all over the grounds, and it made excellent toilet paper. There was another question about a bathroom in my shelter. Did I have a bathroom in my shelter? What did I do on those cold, snowy nights? Well, I'm going to be honest. On occasion, I did piddle in the corner of my shelter when it was like minus 25. The reason, because when I fit my door in, I had extra moss I stole from my smoker because, you know, food procurement was over at that point, and I'd stuff the cracks of my door to keep any air out, so it was totally sealed. And that took some time. And so, you know, in the middle of the night when it's minus 25 out, you don't want to do that and head out in the snow. So, and it was so cold, I mean, your piddle just kind of settled down into the moss, and the floor of my shelter was still like very spongy and soft. And so yeah, I did, but never pooping in the shelter. So there was no bathroom in the shelter, but I did sneak the odd piddle in there in the middle of the night near the end. Now, a lot of questions about fishing as well. The biggest one probably, why the heck didn't I use a fishing rod? So I did make a fishing rod. I didn't quite finish it. I practiced how to make one before Clay Hayes did a video on that, so I knew how to make one. But I never got around to finishing it because I was spending all my time fishing, and you saw on the show, I was able to cast out a really good ways, and I was having success doing it. Now, the only reason I was thinking about perhaps building one and finishing was for hook setting. You're right, I agree. I probably would have caught a few more fish with that rod, just being able to have that extra torque on the line to set the hook a little bit better. But I was having a lot of success catching fish hand lining, and I enjoyed it, and I didn't really see the need for it. The other reason is this. If you ever built a reel that's just a spool, you know, the reels that most people have used that are purchased at hardware stores or fishing stores, the ratio is not 1-to-1. Like when you do one rotation of the handle, the spool spins multiple times, and it comes in so fast. And these lake trout and pike, when you're playing them and they're out there and you're reeling it, it's too slow, much too slow. If you watch the other contestants with fishing rods, what did they do when they had a fish hooked? They threw their rod down on the ground and hand lined it in. Because they didn't have any treble hooks, and lake trout have really hard mouths, and they're incredible fighters. They shake their head and they're torquing on your line. I wanted to get them out of the water as fast as I could. So my whole philosophy was the longer they're in the water, the longer they have a chance to get off your hook. I'd set the hook and I'd run backwards up the rock to get them out of the water as fast as I could. Also, I had to run back to the top of the rock where it was flat to drop my spool so it didn't roll back down in the water. So that was kind of twofold. So I'd give it a quick jerk, run to the top of the rock, drop my spool, and hand line back down to the water. It worked for me. I caught between 90 and 100 pounds of fish when I was out there. The edit did not show all the fish that I caught. I think they showed me catch 9 fish, and I caught a lot more than 9 fish. Next question, how many lures did I lose? Well, pretty sure I only lost 2. I lost one on that big pike when I went to set the hook and the monofilament snapped off on his teeth. And I lost another one on a log on the other side of that point that I was fishing in. I got a few more snags, but it was earlier on when it was still warm enough for me to dive in, go down and hook it off the log manually. So I actually went home with most of my hooks. Next question, did I bring any souvenirs back home from my experience? I only brought 2. I brought a rusty tin can that I found and stored my hooks in, and I brought home that deadfall mousetrap that I had made. Sorry, I had to change camera angles. The sun was hitting me right in the face. How was I feeling knowing my students were watching? I didn't really alter my behavior out there knowing that my students were watching. I just was myself, and I can kind of prove that point by day 30 when I lost all those fish, you know, my temper tantrum, the swearing, things like that. So, you know, was I worried about disappointing them? Yes, I was. I didn't want to, you know, that was one of my fears coming on the show, tapping out early or not being able to procure any food and having to leave. Like that was a bit of pressure because I knew that all my students would be watching, but it didn't impact how I behaved out there at all. What did they show that I wished they had? I'll answer another question within this one. Was I happy with my edit? That goes along this one. So generally, I was really happy with my edit. I liked how they portrayed a lot of my positivity and just kind of showed who I really was. What did they show? Oh, I know the answer to that question. So I kind of wish they would have showed a bit more of my food procurement. I wish they had showed me catch a few more fish. They only showed one of my small game archery kills. I think I shot 5 grouse with my bow, and I got 2 headshots on squirrels. I missed a few as well, but they didn't show those either. You know, I'm generally very happy with my edit. I thought they did a good job telling my story out there. I loved how they incorporated my father and the owl. I was really happy with that, and ending with the owl as well, because that was a big part of my experience. No, there's not a lot that I wish they had shown. I did a few silly things, a few funny things too out there that they didn't show, but all in all, super happy with the edit. Would I do it again? In my post-show interview, I said no. But now, thinking back, you know, there was a lot of good times out there, a lot of enjoyment, a lot of fun. It did get difficult later on in the game for sure. Long nights in the shelter were definitely hard, but would I do it again? I think I probably would. Next question, how did I stave boredom off and keep myself busy? So I'm naturally kind of a person that doesn't mind not having a lot to do. I don't have to keep moving all the time, so it's just kind of my personality for one. I don't always have to be doing something to be happy. I can sit in silence for long periods of time and just kind of let my brain work through things. And I mean, a good example of that is sitting in tree stands for 3 to 5 hours hunting. I'm generally always happy when I'm sitting in my tree stand, even when I don't see game. And I remember lying in my teepee at night, you know, especially at the end when it got dark very early in the day, and you had to spend a lot of hours in there. I'd lay down on my bed, I'd turn on my headlamp just kind of in the corner so I had a bit of light in my teepee. The fire may have been going, sometimes it wasn't. And it was incredible how fast time went by, and I was just thinking. I'd lay there, and it was like my thoughts were like watching TV or reading a book. And so I'd lay down at 5, and I'd just lay there with my eyes open, looking up at the top of looking at the hole through the top of my teepee, and just thinking about home, thinking about life, thinking about what happened that day, how many people are left in the game. My mind was just working, and all of a sudden 3 hours would have gone by. So yeah, just thinking. Thinking was my TV, and thinking was my book. Next question: was it hard keeping the secret that I was the last one? Yes and no. It wasn't too bad because it was just a lot of excitement knowing that I'd be able to share it eventually. It wasn't too bad. What was hard is when people ask you directly, and I'm not a very good liar, so I mean, I just kind of said, hey, can't say anything, signed an NDA, you're gonna have to wait and watch the show. And then I'd kind of divert the conversation, but no, it wasn't actually that bad. I was excited to share it with people, but when it finally happened, but no, wasn't too bad at all. The next question: were you frustrated that your smoker wasn't working? Well, my smoker did actually work. It worked perfectly. The edit showed me trying to smoke fish on that really windy day. It was windy for about 2 days, and yeah, some of the wind went through. It just took longer, but all the other times after that, the smoker worked perfectly. I smoked almost all my fish as soon as until it got cold. So no, the smoker wasn't an issue at all. I mean, without that smoker, I would not have made it this far into the game, because I would have lost many pounds of fish to warm weather. Next question: how much firewood did I have stockpiled? I always made sure I had 3 days worth. So if I was sick or got hurt during those cold times near the end of the game, I'd always have 2 more days on top of the day I'd spent in there with firewood. What would you consider your lowest skill set while you were out there? Probably my lowest skill set out there was mushrooms. I was scared of mushrooms. I mean, I know they don't have a great caloric value, but I had studied mushrooms quite a bit. It's not my area of expertise, and I did find quite a few mushrooms. They always looked a little bit different than the pictures that I had studied, and I was just too scared to take a chance, so I stayed away from mushrooms. I found some mushrooms that were that big, and I was 90% sure that they were hedgehog mushrooms, but I just did not want to take the chance because I was catching fish. Quite a few questions on this one as well. From that old video on YouTube, the one with the groundhog. Ellen, 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 Steve, Steve. I get it all the time. I even got it on some radio interviews I did a couple of weeks ago. The radio host starts going, Ellen, Ellen, Ellen. So a lot of people said when my name came up, they'd yell that out in their living room. So pretty funny, and a lot of people do that to me. Was I going to be pulled at the med check? This was asked multiple times during the thread. The answer is no, I was not going to be pulled during that med check. That med check was actually kind of a fantasy med check, because they knew that Lisa, my wife, was waiting on the beach, so they were just kind of going through the motions of the med check. But I did talk with them afterwards, and they said that no, I was in no danger of being pulled, but they were going to increase my med checks to much shorter durations, maybe every 2 or 3 days after that time. So the answer is no, I was not going to be pulled. What were students' reactions when they found out that you were on the show? Disbelief. A lot of kids hadn't heard of the show, but the fans of the show were definitely super excited and kind of in awe. But to them, I'm just Mr. Tenta, and it's like, oh, he was on alone. Cool. Okay, neat. So their reactions were pretty calm. No one really went crazy, but they were pretty intrigued and pretty happy. And man, did they ask me a lot of questions. They asked me so many. The number one question that those kids asked me at that school, Mr. Tenta, did you win? Did you win? Daily, over and over and over again. But has Doritos reached out yet? No, unfortunately, they have not reached out to me about anything. That question was based off of the end there when I said, man, just before, as my wife was sneaking up behind me, I talked about my food fantasies, and food fantasies are out of this world. Like, they're so powerful, and I could never make anyone understand how powerful they were unless you were deprived of that much food. But man, my food fantasies were number one, Hawaiian pizza. Number two, peanut M&Ms. I'm not sure why, I don't really eat them that much at home, but they were just kept popping in my mind. And number three, sweet chili heat Doritos. Those were my top three. What was outside my shelter that night? I was banging a stick on the inside of my teepee. I never saw it. I'm pretty sure they were martins because they were kind of scurrying. It was more of a scurrying noise, but too big to be a mouse. And you know, they showed earlier in the episodes, they showed a martin climbing on Taz's shelter. I did have fish in there, and I had been cooking fish, so I'm sure the martins smelt it, and they were just checking it out because I did have tracks around my shelter most mornings. How has this experience changed my outlook and appreciation of things? Number one, appreciation of family and how much they mean to you, and how important it is to tell all the people you love how much they mean to you. Super important, and I did that as soon as I got back. And food and just things that we have. It really solidified that we have too much. We have a lot more than we need. What were some of the best lessons from previous contestants? I would say building too large of a shelter and blowing out your calories. And I mentioned that on the show as well. It was a voiceover as I was building my shelter. So that was probably my most important one. I built a fairly simple shelter that didn't take a lot of energy to construct, and I didn't have to haul stuff from very far away. The other lesson would be that food is everything. And once my shelter is organized, all my effort should be on procuring as much food as I can. The last thing I learned from previous contestants is keep a positive attitude. I mean, like, I guess Coulter was always so positive. Yeah, there are many contestants that I picked up little tips like that from, like Wania, just staying positive. Another question about my teepee. Did I have room to stand up? Yes, I did. I made it that way on purpose. So it just made getting dressed a lot easier in the mornings if you could stand up. I had quite a bit of room in there to stand up, so most definitely I could stand up and stretch out. I actually probably made it a little bit too big. I had more room in there than I actually needed. Any weird stuff from fans? Nope, not yet. Not yet. No weird stuff from fans. All just positive and supportive comments. Tell me about the rodents and how bad were they? They were pretty bad. They were running over my arms when I was sleeping, chewing on my sleeping bag when I was sleeping, chewing holes in my sweaters. Yeah, they were a pain. Yeah, it's just unsettling when you're lying there and they're scurrying around your shelter. But once I built that deadfall trap, I killed 14 or 15 mice with that deadfall trap. One time I killed 3 mice throughout the night, and I set it again in the morning. When I came back from fishing, I had 4th one in there. So yeah, so I'd kill them, a big bunch of them fairly quickly. Then there wouldn't be mice for a few days, and then they'd start coming in again. So it was kind of a continuous battle, but I definitely thinned the population, and I actually started hanging all my stuff around my teepee. I hung up all my clothes. When I left the shelter, I hung my sleeping bag, I hung my bow. I just made sure everything was up out of the way so the rodents couldn't destroy it. Did I eat any mice? I didn't eat any mice. I never even really considered it because I always had a fairly decent supply of smoked fish. So maybe I should have. I didn't feel the need to eat them. Just some information about our boundaries. They weren't marked with anything, and this isn't a secret because they show this on the show all the time. All contestants have a GPS. They call it the yellow brick, and that's how we check in every night. We have to check in the morning that we're alive. It's just a little button. I'm okay. Check in at nighttime. I'm okay. And if you don't check in, they come, and you get in a lot of trouble because the team is risking their lives coming to get you, because they'll try to come in most weather conditions unless it's pretty severe. So it was really important to check in every night and every morning. And this yellow brick you had to have with you all the time. And when you reached your boundary, and the boundaries were huge. Like there's this idea that our boundaries are fairly small. I mean, I went quite a ways in every direction, and I never got beeped. When you're approaching your boundary, your brick will go beep, beep, beep. and tell you that you're close to your boundary, but I never had it go off, and I felt like I explored pretty far in either direction. Can we get away with only using GoPros to film? The GoPros are more for hunting, for movement, and as a secondary camera. So they want you to use the big quality camera as much as you can. So they want you to set it up on the tripod and the big camera, and maybe have a head mount on, a chest mount, or a small tripod kind of as a side shot. The editing team likes that because they can switch from view to view, different views, right? From big camera to little camera. So they'll show you casting, and then when you get a fish, the smaller camera here will pick up maybe a shot of the fish or your head camera. So they always wanted as many cameras going as you could. You wouldn't get as many good shots just using the GoPros. I like this next question. What were several of your dream items besides a firearm or anything like that? So my dream items, one would be a quality fishing reel, like a really nice, smooth, high ratio fishing reel that I could just build my rod and attach onto with either snare wire or paracord. That would have been awesome. And books. I would have loved to have a bunch of books to read during those long nights. That would have been awesome. And my other dream item would have been a bunch of 5-a-diamond lures with big, nasty treble hooks on the bottom. Just the weight of them, you could cast them way out there, and pike, pickerel, and lake trout, love that pattern, 5-a-diamonds. Those are my 3 dream items. There was a question about snaring and why there was so little snaring going on this season. Well, that's easy, because I think all our locations didn't have a lot of rabbits to snare. I mean, when we were in orientation camp, there were rabbits everywhere. We're like, yeah, man, there's rabbits everywhere. High-fiving, snaring's gonna be awesome. I believe the reason why there were no rabbits at my site, it was overrun with marten, and I think the marten had cleaned out the rabbit population at my site. And I did have snares set up, but as you saw in episode 3 or 4, I caught a marten in my snare, and we weren't allowed to catch them anyways. And those marten were running those trails all over my area, so I would have just ended up catching more martens that I would have had to release. So I just took all my snares down, and I focused solely on fishing. How did I pike proof my lures? Well, they showed it on an episode, just a brief little snippet, but I used snare wire and I made a wire leader. And I made it longer. My first one was only this long, and I lost that lure to that Wyatt-sized pike right in front of my eyes. And so after that, I made it much longer. So even if they did take the lure deep down into their throat, it would still be wire, so it wouldn't cut my line. Was there any, darn, I wish I've thought of that. From other contestants, Melanie, rock tripe. I would have maybe harvested some rock tripe just to go along with my fish, but yeah. And the other one is, when I got back, my father-in-law noticed me cutting the tail off the fish and discarding the tail. He said, "Are you crazy? Why didn't you cut a piece of that tail off and attach it onto your lure to make it more realistic?" I'm like, oh, that would have been awesome. So the next question is about my lure. There were some requests on, they wanted to see how I made my lure, what it looked like up close, what sort of lures did I use. I'm going to do an additional YouTube video about how to make that lure, and I'm going to go fishing with that lure and try to catch some bass. Next question. Did you have any skin or lip care with you when you're out there? No, we had nothing. We weren't allowed any lip balm or anything like that. No Vaseline for dry hands, nothing. So, but my lips didn't get too bad. They did get chapped once when I fished in the wind for a couple days, and there was this cold wind on my face. My lips got chapped pretty badly. But I think my steady diet of fish and all those fish oils and whatnot, they kept my skin fairly good. When my wife saw me, one of the first things she said to me was, "Man, your skin looks so good." Whether it was because of the fish or just a clean diet, no preservatives, no junk food, no sugar. I mean, my body went through an incredible cleanse when I was out there, eating nothing but fish, grouse, squirrel, a few low bush cranberries that I found, and just water. So yeah, she said my skin looked great, and you heard her then. She said my eyes looked crystal clear. They were white. They weren't bloodshot. And so besides having no energy and being hungry, I think that cleanse was good for certain parts of my body. I'm no doctor though, I don't know for sure, but I felt pretty good. I didn't have any knee pain. I had no joint pain, and I generally felt quite good until I started exerting, and just besides the low energy point and the few dizzy spells I'd have near the end, no, my body felt good. Next question, and this was a popular question as well. Discuss my recovery. And I'm super lucky. I had no effects whatsoever. I mean, yeah, I was skinny as hell, but during the refeeding process, my blood pressure was perfect. Yeah, no, I felt good, and I had nothing going on with my teeth, nothing going on with my hair. No, I absolutely not. I gained weight back fairly quickly, and I went back to my normal life. Next question, did I go back to teaching? Yes, I did. I got back early December, I think, and I began teaching again partway through January, and I taught the whole second semester full time. What was the hardest thing you dealt with when you were out there? The hardest thing was probably the cold. What could I have improved on? My foraging. How many people did I think were left near the end? I was thinking from day 50 something on, so I was pretty sure that there weren't very many, and I was confident that I had a shot at it, and that every day I stayed out there just would bring me a little bit closer, and it could come down to an hour a day, you know, so I just kind of kept pushing as long as I could. Was it tough sleeping in a real bed again? Absolutely not. It was awesome. The only issue I had was for about a week after I got out, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd look down at my fire pit, looking to see if I had enough wood, and I'd think I had to light a fire until I realized, wait a minute, I'm not in my teepee. So I did have weird dreams and like waking up thinking I was in my teepee for at least a week or two. Another thing, my wife thought this was hilarious. So this was kind of part of my mental readjustment period. When I got home, it was kind of weird, like you're in this big heated house with a fridge full of food and people running around. You can go watch TV, you read a magazine, play on your phone, whatever you want to do. But there were parts of me that it was such a quick transition from that hardcore life into teepee to everything and more that you could ever hope for. So in the evenings I did this for a while. My sleeping bag was like in the corner of our room upstairs, and I'd throw the sleeping bag out. It sounds weird, but I did do it. My wife took pictures of me. I'd throw my sleeping bag out on the floor. I'd go in my sleeping bag, and I could just smell that smoky smell, a little fishy too, a little bit of body odor maybe. But it comforted me. It was really weird. And I'd actually fall asleep on the carpet, and I did that numerous times. Just a weird comfort thing. I can't really explain it. Next question, did I get parasites from that fish? No, I did not get parasites from that fish. And when they showed those fish guts in my hand, those looked like worms, but those weren't worms. That was just part of the guts. The only thing that was wrong with it, they had a whole bunch of white dots, and they could have been eggs from a tapeworm. I don't know. I just took them out. The meat was fine. There was nothing in them. And like I said, I boiled it and I had no ill effects whatsoever. Oh my guts. I'm just kidding. Question about my bow. What kind of bow was that? And just information about my arrows and broadheads. My bow, it's a 50-pound custom-made longbow I had made from a Canadian in Ontario. I'm a gap shooter, and I used really heavy, slow arrows with a cut-on contact, single bevel broadhead. So the reason I went with a slow, really heavy arrow was because I wanted to get the most penetration I could on big game, primarily moose. I just wanted to make sure that bow was set up for moose. At my draw length, my bow was probably closer to 53 or 54 pounds. So the next question was, what was my wife's reaction to how skinny I was? So when my wife came to surprise me on day 66, I had all that heavy winter clothing on, so you couldn't really tell how skinny I was. I mean, she saw it in my face, but she was happy because my eyes still looked bright and I still had my humor and stuff like that. So she was fine. She didn't really notice too much. But when we got back to camp, and when I was like, she was in the room with me, and I was like, I took off my shirt and I was going to go have a shower. You should have seen the look on her face. She's like, she tried to hide it, but her eyes told the whole story. She was a little shocked at how much weight I had lost. And that brings me to the other question, how much weight did I lose? I went in at 259 pounds, and my final weigh-in, went right when I got back, was 181. So I had lost 79 pounds. Don't forget that I had gained 40-ish, 45-ish pounds for the show. So my wife saw the extremes. She saw me the heaviest I ever was going into the experience, and she saw the smallest I'd ever been since like grade 10. What are the protocols for safety near the end when everyone's kind of in rougher shape? They don't change. I mean, we had our morning check-in and our evening check-in. And near the end, like I said earlier, the med checks would become more frequent. And yeah, so nothing really changes except the frequency of the med checks. My whole time I was out there, I only had 2 med checks, not including the last one, which wasn't really a real med check. They were just kind of doing that for effect on the show, so my wife would have a chance to come up behind me and surprise me. So that kind of leads into the next question. What happens if the safety team can't get to you because of weather? Nothing. You are SOL. And we all know that going in. There are times during extreme weather that they can't get to us, and all contestants know that going into the game. So there is definitely a risk. So a lot of questions about the reactions to my students. You got to remember that the show didn't start till June the 8th, and school ended shortly after that. And we're still on summer holidays, so I haven't really had a chance to connect with very many of my students to get their reactions. The next question is, how did I stay warm in my teepee when it got so cold near the end of the game? The answer is simple: hot rocks. I had a routine. I'd go into my teepee, I'd seal up the door, I'd light a fire, I'd cook my fish, I'd heat it, my teepee would get nice and warm, and before I went to bed, I'd get these 2 giant, really dense rocks that I found, and I'd heat them up in the fire to the point of them being so hot they'd almost burn me, but not quite. And I'd bring them into my sleeping bag. I'd put one in my groin and one on my chest, and it was so money. It was awesome. It was like paradise. I was so warm, and they'd last actually for about 4 hours. So I'd wake up when it got cold in my teepee, and my rocks had lost all their heat. I'd wake up, I'd get dressed, I'd have all my fire stuff laid out before I went to bed. I'd light another fire, I'd heat up my teepee. This was like 3 or 4 in the morning sometimes, and I'd heat those rocks up again. I'd put them in my sleeping bag, and that would last me till morning. And I did that every night for the last at least 2 weeks. So next question, at the end, is it survival or suffering? This is a really interesting question and probably up for debate, but I believe that it's still survival, because having a positive mindset to deal with the suffering is still part of survival. And getting through those cold times, you can still employ elements of survival to keep warm, such as the hot rocks, not panicking, keeping a positive mental attitude. All those are part of survival. How did I meet my wife? I met my wife at the University of British Columbia in the teacher training program that they offered there in the 90s. Yeah, we were both training to be teachers, and we were the same class, and that's how it happened. Are there prizes for second and third? The answer is no, unfortunately. Did the other contestants know that I won? As far as I know, no, besides one. There was one contestant that knew I won because we were in refeeding camp together, and that was Wyatt. Next question. Will I do talks and lectures about my time on Alone? The answer is yes, that's something I'd like to do in the future. How do family members get there? Once the 9th person taps out, production contacts the family member that you've chosen to come and surprise you. They fly them up there. I mean, it took 2 days for my wife to get there, and so I had to stay 2 days. Once the game was technically over, I had to endure 2 more nights out there, but you know, it's totally worth it. That surprise with Lisa was one of the most exciting moments of my life, for sure. Did I regret not bringing salt? No, I did not, because I think that I got enough salt from the fish that I ate. What is the most valuable lesson I will teach my students? There's quite a few, but I think probably the most important ones would be to stay positive, believe in yourself, keep pushing, and you can achieve amazing things with the right attitude and effort. What was your most stressful situation when you were out there? So I think I had two. The first one was I went through a stretch of not being able to catch any fish. I caught fish day 1, day 2, day 3, but I think there was about a week in there somewhere where I didn't catch any fish. The fishing just shut off in the lake for some reason. I'm not sure why. I'm glad I had the fish on day 1 and day 2 and day 3 to get me through that, but I was definitely starting to get stressed out about my food procurement, and I was worried, but luckily the fishing picked up and I was able to catch fish reasonably consistently. The second most stressful situation was when it turned really cold. I mean, day 50, it was like a massive change in temperatures, and I woke up in the middle of the night because I didn't have any hot rocks at that time, and I was super cold, and that night was definitely a struggle. I had to put on every piece of clothing I had, and I just went under the blankets to try to keep warm, but I shivered through that night. But that taught me a good lesson, and I never went into another night unprepared like that. I had hot rocks and 3 days worth of firewood after that time. Next question, where can I get a Tenta Outdoors hat? I haven't set up a merch store yet, but that is in the works. How long did it take me to put my weight back on? Probably about a month and a half or 2 months, because man, I wasn't holding back. There was no dieting going on. I was on a seafood diet. If I saw food, I ate it. It was really enjoyable. But then when I got up to my normal weight, I had to tone things down a little, just kind of stay at my healthy weight, which is like 220, 225. Did I hear boats and helicopters? And how did that impact you? I heard boats and helicopters fairly often. And it messed with my brain because I was like, oh, did somebody tap out? Is somebody else having a med check? I could see boats in the distance going across water when I was fishing. So I was thought, are they filming for the B-roll? Is the helicopter filming for B-roll? Is the helicopter evacuating someone? Are they having a med check? So these are things that were constantly going through your mind when you saw the boats and helicopters. But yeah, it definitely played with my mind. Did my experience being a teacher help with my endurance and coping with hard times? I would say yeah, probably. You have to come up with a lot of strategies being a teacher, like especially patience with some kids, when you're dealing with tough behaviors. You got 30 kids in front of you that don't really want to do what you want to do. You have to come up with alternate ways of teaching and doing things, and perhaps that strategy of coming up with alternate ways of doing things in the classroom may have helped me through some difficult times out there. So I would say yeah. I'll revisit another question, which was, how much did you have left? I had in my mind that I wasn't going to even consider tapping until I was out of food, and I still had 2 or 3 days worth of fish left. So I imagine I probably would have pulled the plug if I didn't acquire any more food on day 69 or day 70. That was probably the end of my rope. Folks, thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I hoped I answered everyone's questions. If there is another question that you have, or one that I didn't get to, because I was inundated with probably 300 questions or so, a lot of them were related, but there could be some that I didn't answer. Please leave it in the comments and I'll try to get to it. My name's Alan, this is Tenta Outdoors. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end, and we'll see you next time.